Congressman Tony Gonzales, a Republican who voted for the new bipartisan gun bill and represents the city of Uvalde, Texas, where, of course, 19 children and 2 adults were killed in a school shooting back in May. Congressman, we thank you so much for joining us. You, of course, were one of 14 Republicans in the House who voted for the Safer Communities Act. Earlier this year, you tweeted that you would, quote, do everything I can to oppose gun grabs from the far left. So what was so different then about this time and this bill that it ultimately won your vote?
Yeah, Lindsay, thank you for having me. You know, part of the decision on this legislation and others has always been this. One, would this legislation have prevented the Uvalde shooting? And the Safer Community Act absolutely would do that. The other part was this going to infringe upon constitutional rights? And this piece of legislation would not do that. The last part of why I voted yes on the Safer Community Act is this is the largest investment in U.S. history in mental health. We always talk about it, but we absolutely need it more than ever. And it's not only for urban America, it's for rural America as well. So I was proud to support this legislation. I'm glad it's signed into law.
What aspect of this legislation in particular would have prevented the Uvalde shooting from happening?
Yeah, the biggest aspect is extensive background checks for juveniles. You know, there's no reason that the Uvalde shooter should have ever been able to purchase that firearm. Not because he was 18, not because it was an AR, but because he was mentally unstable. And now that this piece of legislation is signed into law, you know, the Uvalde shooting had an extensive juvenile record of mental illness. And this is one of the pieces of a gaping hole that has now been signed into law. It doesn't solve everything, but it moves the ball forward. The other aspect of it, too, is mental health isn't just about the negative and the violence. I'd argue there's a lot of Americans dealing with anxiety and depression that we need to get in the forefront of, and the Safer Communities Act exactly does that.
You were the lone Texas House Republican to break away from your party and support this bill. How difficult of a position was that for you to take?
You know, Lindsay, I represent a district that is kind of split down the middle. So everything I do, I have to answer to my constituents. And this piece of legislation is no different. One of the things that I did was I leaned into it and I kept my Second Amendment activists, my gun manufacturers involved every step of the way. That way there weren't any surprises. When I talked about it not infringing upon the Constitution, that's not my words, that's their words. So that was one area that was able to help out. The other part I'd say is, look, there's an appetite for bipartisanship in America, and I think it shouldn't stop here. I represent 42% of the southern border. I think there's an opportunity for immigration reform. You know, sadly, the 53 migrants that were found dead in the back of a trailer, that was in my district as well. So I'm hoping that this piece of legislation is the start of many things, and we can look at it not as Republicans, not as Democrats, but as Americans. How can we bring America together for the betterment of everyone?
And Congressman, you also shared a really powerful personal story about your own childhood growing up in a home where you were a witness to domestic violence. You tweeted that, quote, school was my sanctuary from the chaos at home. How did that weigh on your decision to have you vote for this bill?
Yeah, no, it's a very personal story, and I spent 20 years in the military. I retired a Master Chief. I was a cryptologist. I held a top-secret clearance, and when people asked me how my day was, I said it was fine, and then they asked me what I did, I said a little this, a little that. So I never really shared my life experiences. Now, as a member of Congress, there is nothing private about it, and part of that is my upbringing, where I was in a very violent environment. Matter of fact, I remember spending time at a battered women's shelter with my mother. Those moments have never left me, and it weighed in heavily. Looking at it, you know, we have to protect the innocent. We, being lawmakers, have to protect the innocent. We have to make sure that we never infringe upon our Constitution as well. And I think we can do that. We've shown we can do that by the passing of the Safer Communities Act.
You were also at the Rose Garden ceremony this morning with President Biden hailing the passage of the new gun bill. At that event, of course, we saw a parent from the Parkland shooting, Manuel Oliver, interrupt the president's speech, imploring him to do more. Oliver was eventually escorted out. But we know that a lot of parents, including those in your own district, want to see more action taken. So we'll also put that question to you. What more can be done?
Yeah, I think this is a start. And for every parent that lost a loved one, I think this is important to show that Congress can work, that Washington can pass meaningful legislation. There was another a family member there, a survivor of one of the Parkland victims, was Max Schachter, and he pushed the Luke and Alex Act. And he has been pushing this legislation ever since Parkland. And guess what? That piece of legislation was embedded in the Safer Communities Act, which would help everyone. So I think there's a lot of positives to take away from it, but we can't stop here. We can't, give a victory lap, if you will. This is a moment. Hey, how can we make Congress work again? And to me, it goes, what's the next thing we can work on? Immigration reform, securing our border, I think is an opportunity there.
Congressman Tony Gonzales, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.